80% of mid-market companies cannot tell you right now how much cash they actually hold. Every morning, treasury teams spend 3 to 4 hours logging into separate bank portals, copying numbers into spreadsheets, and building a report that is already stale before the CFO sees it. One multinational retailer borrowed $50 million while $60 million sat idle in accounts no one was watching. The true cost of that blindness runs far deeper than interest. 8 out of 10 mid-market companies operate in a state of partial blindness when it comes to their own cash. The numbers are stark. Most finance teams juggle relationships with 8 to 15 banks, each with its own portal, passwords, and reporting quirks. Every morning, the ritual begins before sunrise. A treasury analyst logs into the first bank, downloads a balance report, then repeats the process for the next and the next, sometimes more than a dozen times, copying numbers into a master spreadsheet, double-checking for errors, tracking down missing files, and chasing late statements. The hours slip away. By the time the so-called morning cash report lands on the CFO's desk, it reflects a reality already 3 or 4 hours old. Industry surveys confirm this daily grind. 71% of finance leaders say it is difficult to get a complete view of cash across all accounts. On average, treasury staff spend 3 to 4 hours every single day just piecing together yesterday's balances. Despite the presence of enterprise resource planning systems and treasury management platforms, 63% of teams still rely on Excel as the final source of truth. Each cell, each formula, each pasted number is another chance for error. For a multinational retailer with 47 accounts spread across 12 countries, this process is not just tedious, it is risky. The company once borrowed $50 million to cover short-term needs, only to discover months later during an audit that $60 million had been sitting idle in overlooked accounts. The cost was $2 million in unnecessary interest in a single quarter. Multiply this across thousands of firms, and the total waste climbs into the hundreds of millions each year. The illusion of control shattered by a spreadsheet. A private equity integration lead describes the scene after a major acquisition. Dozens of new bank accounts, each tied to a different subsidiary, each governed by its own legacy contract and signatory rules. The finance team inherits not just new entities, but a patchwork of banking relationships and compliance obligations. In the first weeks post-deal, every account must be cataloged, every signatory updated, every legacy contract reviewed. Local regulations in places like Brazil or India mean that even payroll accounts cannot be closed or consolidated quickly. The result is a sprawling network, sometimes 40 or 50 accounts added in a single transaction, each one at a potential blind spot in the company's cash picture. The technical hurdles compound the problem. Enterprise resource planning systems like SAP and Oracle were designed for batch processing, not real-time visibility. These platforms only show posted transactions, often lagging by a full business day or more. When a treasury analyst runs a cash position report, it is already out of date. Meanwhile, subsidiaries may operate on entirely different banking platforms, each requiring separate logins and each exporting data in a unique format. There is no universal connector, no single dashboard that unifies the view. Faced with this complexity, teams fall back on the tool they trust, Excel. 63% of treasury departments across mid-market and enterprise still use spreadsheets as their main consolidation tool. Each spreadsheet becomes a fragile bridge between systems, vulnerable to errors, version conflicts, and formula mistakes. The more accounts and entities involved, the greater the risk that balances are missed or misreported. For the chief financial officer, what looks like a consolidated cash position is often a best guess, stitched together from fragments. The illusion of control persists, even as the real numbers remain just out of reach. Across the mid-market and enterprise landscape, the numbers tell a story that cannot be ignored. Each year, U.S. corporations forfeit between $100 million and $500 million in unnecessary borrowing costs, money lost not to market swings or fraud, but to a simple lack of real-time cash visibility. This is not an isolated problem, it is a systemic leak confirmed by multiple audit firm and consultancy surveys. Idle cash stranded in overlooked accounts soaks up opportunity. At the same time, other parts of the business rack up overdraft fees or draw expensive credit lines. The paradox is stark. One account sits untouched while another pays to borrow, and the gap between the two can run into millions. Benchmarks from the Global Treasurer's 2026 survey show that, on average, 5% of total cash balances remain idle and unutilized, while overdraft fees eat up another 0.24%. When these rates are descaled to the thousands of mid-market firms operating in the U.S., the resulting waste lands squarely in the nine-figure range. Audit partners now flag these mismatches as material control weaknesses, citing them in the key audit matters of statutory reports. Lost yield on idle balances, excess interest on avoidable borrowing, and the cost of manual workarounds all accumulate quietly, rarely surfacing until an audit or litigation forces the numbers into the open. In the words of a senior audit partner, "We routinely find tens of millions in idle cash at the same time companies are drawing on credit lines. It is not a rare event, it is the norm. This is not just an operational inconvenience, it is a direct hit to the balance sheet, draining value from companies that believe their controls are robust. The scale is too large and the evidence too consistent to dismiss as an isolated flaw." The next time a CFO is asked, "How much cash do we actually have right now?" the true answer may be far more expensive than anyone realizes. A single day's paperwork tells the story better than any statistic. The retailer's treasury analyst begins the morning with a redacted cash position report, 47 accounts listed, balances in 12 currencies, each line item timestamped before 8:30 in the morning, the total $60 million, scattered across subsidiaries from Singapore to Spain. By noon, a drawdown confirmation arrives from the lead bank, $50 million wired from a revolving credit facility signed off by the chief financial officer. The rationale recorded in the email chain projected cash shortfall based on the consolidated spreadsheet from the previous day, but the spreadsheet was already stale. Several accounts had not been updated since the last BAI2 or MT94 file came through overnight. The analyst, walking through the process later for the audit team, points to the gaps, missing statements, currency mismatches, balances that never made it into the master workbook. The audit memo, stamped confidential, lays out the consequences. $60 million sat idle, $50 million borrowed at commercial rates, $2 million in unnecessary interest incurred in a single quarter. The chief financial officer, in a recorded interview, admits the oversight. We thought we had a handle on it. The numbers told a different story. Forensic review of the documents confirms the sequence. The cash report, the MT-940 extract, and the drawdown notice all align. The receipts are irrefutable. What began as a routine morning report ended with a multi-million-dollar loss, discovered only when auditors demanded proof. Line by line, 57% of companies say they have a treasury management system, yet most still cannot see their true cash position in real time. The problem lies in the technology's limits. Even with a treasury management system, many firms depend on file-based statements, formats like MT-940 and BAI2 that banks generate only once a day, sometimes with hours of processing lag. By the time these files are uploaded or emailed, the balances are already out of date. Bank portals offer more frequent updates, but require manual logins and downloads, multiplying the risk of error and delay. For those who want real-time data, the next step is direct bank application programming interfaces. But here, the obstacles multiply. Inconsistent authentication standards, token refresh failures, and a patchwork of endpoint formats. Integration can take weeks for each bank, and not every institution offers production-ready interfaces. The cost barrier is real. Swift connections and aggregator platforms charge onboarding, monthly, and per transaction fees that add up quickly for firms with dozens of accounts. A bank API engineer describes the daily reality. We build for security, not for speed. Every new connection means a new legal review, a new compliance checklist, a new round of negotiations. The result is a fragmented landscape where even the best-intentioned CFOs still rely on yesterday's numbers. The promise of real-time visibility remains just out of reach, blocked by technical and commercial roadblocks that no single platform has fully solved. 15 minutes. That is how quickly a CFO can now see a true global cash position if the right tools are in place. Treasury management platforms like Kyriba, Coupa, and FIS Quantum connect directly to more than 150 banks, pulling live balances, transactions, and credit line status into a single dashboard. The difference is immediate. Instead of 3 hours spent wrangling spreadsheets, the latest figures refresh automatically every quarter hour. A vendor solutions lead describes the shift as moving from rearview mirror driving to real-time navigation. For companies that have made the leap, the upside is measurable. Independent audits confirm a 30% reduction in external borrowing costs within the first year. That is hundreds of millions in annual savings for larger firms, money that can be redeployed or returned to shareholders. The playbook for CFOs is straightforward. Start with a readiness checklist, catalog every bank relationship, confirm which institutions offer production, grade APIs, and map out which accounts remain dependent on file-based statements. Pilot single bank API connection before scaling up. Regulatory momentum is on your side. Open banking mandates like PSD2 in Europe and the US Real-Time Payments Initiative mean more banks are required to provide secure, real-time data feeds. A private equity integration lead closes with a warning and an invitation. Treat cash visibility as a board-level priority. The sooner you run a pilot, the sooner you unlock hidden liquidity. The path from daily guesswork to real-time certainty is now open. and the financial rewards are too large to ignore. Today, 80% of chief financial officers still operate in the dark, managing an average of 8 to 15 banking partners, with treasury teams spending 4 hours a day just to see stale numbers. Every untracked dollar risks millions of dollars lost. The question now is, will visibility remain a blind spot or become the new baseline for trust?